Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons' new, emergent, dangerous competitor, DC20, by Dungeon Coach. And today I want to talk about Ancestry points, the key difference that Dungeon Coach changed from D&D now, D&D 5th era, right, rules, and he's saying, hey, we're going to abandon what Dungeons and Dragons does, and we're going to do it this different way, and we're going to use Ancestry points. And what I want to talk about with Ancestry points is this a better change, or is this better than what Dungeons and Dragons is doing, or is it worse? So did the work that DC20 that Dungeon Coach did it make DC20 better in this specific area? And this is dealing with species, right? So like human, dwarf, elf, right? Did it make it better or worse? And I'm not going to bury the lead here. Ancestry points. Is it better or worse than the way Dungeons and Dragons handles species right now? The answer is better. So Dungeon Coach actually improved on Dungeons and Dragons here, without a doubt, without exception. All right, so let's talk about Ancestry points. So what is it? So basically what he's doing is he's taking like each species. So let's take dwarf, for example, and he's breaking it into, hey, every species has these benefits, and you could purchase these benefits for points, and these are called Ancestry points, right? And so you can purchase being good with stonework. You could purchase being stalwart and tough, right? You can purchase being able to navigate underground. All these traditional benefits of having a dwarf, okay? And you can purchase these with points, Ancestry points. So let's talk about each part of this. So let's talk about Ancestry. So if you're not aware, Dungeons and Dragons right now has a huge problem. This is probably the number one reason why the 2024 cool rule books are coming out, and that is the word race. The word race is all over Dungeons and Dragons. They're like, oh, you're dwarf race, you're human race, you're elf race, and this is repugnant. Not a single any tabletop role-playing game that you're playing that has the word race in it, if they're working hard to fix it and they're communicating that, like Dungeons and Dragons a while ago said, we're referring to all these as species going forward, right? And when we get the new core rule books, the word race will be gone from Dungeons and Dragons completely, and you will never see it again, right? Like it won't happen, right? And if you're playing some tabletop role-playing game that is still using race in 2024, you should abandon that tabletop role-playing game. It means that the team, the gals and the guys who are working on it have no idea what they're doing, no idea about modern language, no idea about culture. It's a red flag, like on a date, right? Like, it's a red flag to say run for the hills, right? So it's good that Dungeon Coach is fully aware of this, and he's using Ancestry. It also means that this is a conversation we hadn't had before, but a lot of grognards are like, oh, I'm looking for a based game. I don't want anything woke, right? But this is woke. If basically, if you're moving away from the word race, you are saying, hey, I care about culture, I care about language, I care about kindness and tolerance, and so it's a level of woke. And that's interesting because that means, because anybody who wants to right now, you can get a lot of momentum by trading on hatred, right? And Dungeon Coach is not doing that. So I really applaud him using Ancestry. Right now, the hot terms are heritage, ancestry, and lineage, right? Dungeons and Dragons actually uses lineage. I think the best term is heritage. I think that's a really good. It actually moves it away from bioessentialism a bit. I really like the term heritage, but it's not super clear to everybody that you're talking about species. I also think that species might be the best way to handle it. But for right now, if you want that fantasy feel, heritage is really strong. But no points away from Dungeon Coach for using Ancestry. What about the points thing? Hey, Scott, you said adding complexity to Dungeons & Dragons is always wrong. I did say that, right? So why am I not taking points away from him for adding a point system? Isn't that adding complexity to Dungeons and Dragons? Yes, it is adding complexity to Dungeons and Dragons. This is more complicated than just choosing your species and getting what you get, which is in Dungeons and Dragons, right? So the reason why I'm not taking points away from him and saying this is better than Dungeons and Dragons is I do like the idea of one dwarf being significantly different than another dwarf, and this point system does accomplish that. So you can go down this road of increasing complexity, right? For Dungeons and Dragons. Where if you create a new Dungeons and Dragons game, where should you increase complexity? The answer is 0, and the reason why is Index Card RPG has already done this. Index Card RPG genuinely makes a better rule system than Dungeons and Dragons makes, with reduction of complexity everywhere. So we already know it's possible, right? But I think holding anybody up to the standard of Hanker and Farinale is kind of unfair, right? There's really nobody better in all of tabletop role-playing game design. It is really sad. The best designer in the world does not work for Dungeons and Dragons. It's Hanker and Farinale. Now the reality is he's not a threat to anybody. Index Card RPG is sitting over in a corner. I'm the only person on the planet who knows he's a genius. He's got a few fans, but he really ain't doing nothing as far as like moving the needle, right? The biggest thing he's doing is he's making a life for himself in tabletop role-playing game design, which is exciting. But even at that, like, he wants to write novels, and he's like a lot of these artists, he's just not focused enough to be a real threat to D&D. So the reality is, I think I can understand if a creator increases complexity on Dungeons & Dragons 10 to 20%. And this should have been the 10 to 20% that Dungeon Coach drew the line there. But the problem is he raises complexity in a lot of other areas. However, the way he's using Ancestry points is better than Dungeons & Dragons. This is better execution for species than Dungeons & Dragons currently has. Now, while we're at it, I'll just tell you what would be the perfect way to handle this. Neither Dungeon Coach got it right, and nor did Dungeons & Dragons. What I would do is for every species, say, you know what? Every single species in D&D, every single species in DC20 has 5 benefits, and you get to pick 3. And if you want to mix, and if you want to mix, right, and have half water genasi and half tiefling, then you get to pick 2 from each. And you're like, wait a second, Scott, doesn't that mean that mixed species are better? Yes, yeah, I think we should encourage in these tabletop role-playing experiences, we should be encouraging love in every direction, right, and tolerance. So so especially across species, I think that to me seems very clear, right? Because the alternative of it is really horrible and highly prejudiced and only loved by hate mongers. Every single word you just heard is my humble opinion. What's important is when I get to hear your humble opinion, when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider liking, subscribing, and have a fetch millennium.